In the depths of shadow, when all hope seems lost, and the hearts of even the wise grow heavy with despair, there comes sometimes a sound upon the wind, the cry of an eagle, distant yet unmistakable, cutting through the darkness like a blade of silver light. Few ever pause to wonder at the timing of such moments. Fewer still dare ask the question that haunts the margins of every great tale. How could Gandalf the Grey call upon the lords of the sky as if they were bound to him by some ancient oath? Was there perhaps a secret pact forged in the high places of the world, where mortal eyes cannot follow and mortal ears cannot hear? The chronicles speak of their arrivals, sudden, decisive, miraculous, but never of their summoning. When Gwaihir bore the wizard from Orthank's pinnacle, when the Wind Lord descended upon Ziraxagil to rescue one thought lost forever, when the eagles came in the final hour above the Black Gate like living stars falling from heaven, in each moment they appeared not as wild beasts answering a stranger's call, but as allies fulfilling an ancient promise. Somewhere in the vast archives of wind and sky, in the secret council chambers of cloud and storm, Gandalf the Wanderer once walked paths no other wizard dared to tread. He climbed to heights where the air grows thin and the boundary between earth and heaven blurs like watercolor in rain. There, among the eagle's eyries, words were spoken that would echo through the ages, binding the servants of Manwë to the long defeat and distant hope of Middle-earth's darkest hour. To uncover this hidden chapter of the War of the Ring, we must journey beyond the familiar paths of lore, into the forgotten counsels of the great eagles themselves, and discover why the will of Manwë, Lord of the Winds, bent toward a single grey pilgrim's desperate need. The great eagles of Middle-earth are no mere creatures of flea and feather, no simple beasts, however noble their bearing or keen their sight. They are the lords of the upper air, ancient beyond the memory of elves, proud beyond the understanding of men. From the elder days, when Thangorodrim belched its poisonous clouds into the sky, the eagles have served as watchers and guardians, their wings casting shadows across the tapestry of history itself. In the beginning was Thorondor, king of eagles, whose wingspan could darken the sun and whose talons could rend the iron of Angban's gates. He it was who bore Beren and Luthien from Morgoth's fortress, who rescued the body of King Fingolfin from beneath the Dark Lord's very feet, who harried the dragons of the north until even Glaurung feared the whistle of wind through mighty pinions. Thorondor served no earthly king, bowed to no mortal wisdom, yet when the Valar's designs required swift wings and piercing eyes, he came. Through the long ages that followed, his descendants inherited this strange calling. Gwaihir the Windlord, greatest of the Third Age, rules from the peaks of the misty mountains with the same proud independence, the same mysterious allegiance to powers beyond Middle-earth's borders. These are beings touched by the music of creation itself, perhaps Maya clothed in forms of living wind and storm, or spirits given shape by Manwë's own breath. Picture them in their high halls of stone and sky, immense forms perched upon precipices where no other living thing can dwell, their golden eyes surveying leagues of territory with sight keener than any elf lord's, their voices calling across vast distances in tongues older than Quenya. They know the movement of armies before generals plan their marches, see the rise of darkness before wise counselors suspect its stirring, feel the trembling of the earth when shadow reaches forth to claim what was never its own. These were no mere birds awaiting breadcrumbs from a wizard's pouch. They were guardians appointed before the foundations of Barad-dûr were laid, watchers whose vigil began when the world was young and the stars were bright and unafraid. And yet, for all their ancient glory and divine purpose, they were willing to hear the words of Gandalf the Grey. The question that haunts every telling of their aid is simple, terrible, and wonderful. Why? In the high places of the world, where the wind carries conversations across impossible distances and every peak stands as a watchtower against encroaching night, a friendship was forged that would outlast the breaking of kingdoms. Between Gandalf the Grey and Gwaihir the Windlord, something passed that transcended the ordinary bonds between wizard and beast, though neither was ordinary, and their connection reached depths that few could fathom. The moment lives in legend, like a scene painted in silver and storm. Gwaihir's great wings beating against the walls of Orthanc, his talons finding purchase on the tower's smooth stone, while Gandalf, prisoner of Saruman's treachery, stepped out into empty air and trusted his life to another's strength. No summons had been sent, no message carried on the wind, yet the Windlord came at precisely the hour of greatest need, as if he had been waiting in the wings of fate itself. Later, after fire and shadow had claimed their due upon Ziraxagil's peak, when Gandalf fell into darkness and fought his way through death itself to emerge transformed, again the eagles came. Gwaihir bore him from the place of his resurrection, carrying not just a wizard, but something far greater. The White Rider returned from the halls of waiting with authority renewed and purpose clarified. The eagle's great heart must have sensed the change, felt the power that now burned like a flame, unquenchable within his passion. Gyr's mortal form. But what forged such unwavering loyalty? Gratitude, perhaps, for some service rendered in years past, when the world was younger and the eagle's realm faced its own perils? Or was it something deeper, a recognition of kinship between servants of the same master? For Gandalf, though he walked in the shape of an old man bent with wandering, was himself a Maya, a spirit of the same order as those who shaped the world's foundations. His true nature sang in harmony with Manwë's winds, and perhaps the eagles, who were themselves touched by divinity, heard in his voice the echo of their own allegiance to the Lord of the West. There is a moment in every great friendship when trust becomes absolute, when one soul looks upon another and sees not merely an ally, but a reflection of its own deepest loyalties. Between the Grey Pilgrim and the Windlord, that moment must have come in the secret places of the sky, where words were spoken that bound them not by debt or duty, but by shared vision of what Middle-earth might become if shadow could be driven back once more into the void where it belonged. Yet even bonds forged in such rarefied air must be tested in the furnace of desperate need, and the greatest test was yet to come. High above the world, where the air grows thin and the curve of the earth reveals itself to those with eyes to see, there stands a peak known only to the eagles and the west wind. No map marks its location, no chronicle records its name, for it exists in that liminal space where Middle-earth touches the realm of the Valar themselves. Here, in a place beyond the reach of Sauron's searching gaze, Gandalf the Grey once climbed paths that would have tested even elvish endurance, driven by necessity and guided by hope that burned like a star in the wilderness of his heart. The meeting, when it came, possessed all the gravity of a council in Valinor itself. Gwaihir waited upon a throne of living stone, his golden eyes reflecting depths of sky that had witnessed the making of the world. Around him gathered the chief lords of his people, Landroval his brother, Meneldor the Swift, and others whose names were written in no tongue save the language of the wind itself. They came not out of idle curiosity, but summoned by the weight of the hour, for even in their high halls they felt the tremor of approaching darkness. Gandalf stood before them, not as supplicant, but as equal, his grey robes whipping in the mountain gale, while his staff blazed with light that owed nothing to sun or star. When he spoke, his words carried harmonics that resonated in the eagle's very bones, the voice of Olorin, wisest of the Maya, speaking with authority granted before time began. He told them of Sauron's growing power, of the ring that could unmake all joy in Middle-earth, of the small hope carried by smaller folk through paths they could not see or follow. The debate that followed stretched through hours when the sun stood still and the world seemed to hold its breath. The eagles were not made for meddling in the affairs of the earthbound races. Their realm was the sky itself, their responsibility the watching and the warding of heights beyond mortal reach. To descend into the wars of Middle-earth would be to abandon neutrality that had served them since the elder days, to risk lives and honor in causes that might well be doomed from the start. Yet as Gandalf painted his vision of victory, not through force of arms alone, but through the triumph of small courage over great malice, something stirred in the eagles' hearts. Here was no call to serve as beasts of burden or weapons of war, but an invitation to become instruments of eucatastrophe itself, the sudden turn from darkness to light that could transform despair into joy with the beating of great wings. When Gwaihir spoke at last, his voice carried the authority of wind over high places and the wisdom of ages spent watching the world's slow turnings. "We will come," he said, "not at your call alone, but when our own sight shows us that the hour has arrived. We will not fight your battles for you, but when all seems lost and the darkness covers even hope itself, then shall the eagles rise." And in that promise lay the seed of every miraculous rescue yet to come. In the long history of Middle-earth's troubles, few questions have vexed the wise so persistently as this. If Gandalf commanded the friendship of the great eagles, if Gwaihir could bear him swiftly across hundreds of leagues in a matter of hours, why did the Fellowship not simply mount the Windlord and his kin and fly directly to Mount Doom? Why risk the agonies of the long road, the breaking of the company, the countless perils that claimed so many lives and nearly doomed the quest entire? The answer reveals itself only to those who understand that the eagles were never Gandalf's to command, never mere transportation awaiting his convenience. They were sovereign lords of their own realm, bound by laws and loyalties that stretched back to the music of creation. To treat them as flying horses would have been not merely insulting, but catastrophically short-sighted, for their aid came precisely because they were not tools to be used, but allies to be honored. Consider the practical impossibilities first. Sauron's eye swept the skies above Mordor with particular attention, for he feared above all else an assault from the air. The Nazgul on their fell beasts patrolled those dark heavens like guardian demons, their shrieks poisoning the very wind. To fly openly toward Mount Doom would have been to announce the ring's approach like a herald crying news in the market square. The quest succeeded only because it moved in secrecy and shadow, mistaken for the wandering of brigands or fugitive slaves, rather than recognized as the one errand that could unmake the Dark Lord's power. But beyond mere strategy lay deeper truths about the nature of the eagles themselves. They served Manwë, Lord of the Winds and King of the Valar, and through him they were bound to the will of Ilúvatar, the one who shaped the music that gave birth to all things. Their interventions came not at mortal convenience, but at moments of divine appointment, when the great music itself required their wings to carry some soul from darkness into light. The corruption of power, too, played its part in their reluctance. The ring's influence spread like a contagion through all who came near it, and the eagles had witnessed too many ages of darkness to risk their own fall. Better to remain at the edges of the quest, ready to serve at the crucial moment, than to be drawn into the ring's gravity and transformed from saviors into servants of shadow. Most importantly, the victory had to be won by those it was meant to protect. If the eagles had simply carried the ring to its destruction, what would that have taught Middle-earth about courage, about the power that dwells in small hearts when they refuse to surrender? The lesson of the War of the Ring was not that might makes right, but that love and loyalty could triumph over fear and domination. The eagles understood this in their deep wisdom. They were not to win the war, but to ensure that when victory came, it would shine with the light of genuine heroism. Throughout the long ages of Middle-earth, from the elder days when Thangorodrim poisoned the northern skies to the twilight hours of the Third Age, when Sauron's darkness spread like a plague across the lands, the great eagles served a purpose that transcended the simple boundaries of alliance or enmity. They were, in truth, messengers of the Valar, living letters sent from Valinor to remind Middle-earth that the West had not forgotten, that divine providence still moved in the world, though it walked often in disguise. When Fingon the Valiant sought to rescue Maedhros from Thangorodrim's heights, it was Thorondor who bore him up the sheer faces of Morgoth's fortress, enabling a deed of friendship that would echo through the centuries. When the armies of the West seemed doomed beneath the weight of dragons and balrogs in the War of Wrath, the eagles came with the Valar's host, their wings darkening the sky as they fell upon evil like the wrath of heaven itself. Always they appeared at the turning points of history, not to determine the outcome, but to ensure that hope retained its foothold in the world. This pattern reveals the true nature of Gandalf's connection to their kind. As a Maya sent by the Valar to guide and counsel the peoples of Middle-earth, he shared with the eagles a fundamental allegiance that ran deeper than personal friendship or mutual obligation. They recognized in each other servants of the same master, instruments of the same divine purpose that sought to preserve light and freedom against the encroaching shadow. The secret meeting between Gandalf and Gwaihir, therefore, was less a negotiation between strangers than a reaffirmation of bonds that had existed since before either took their current forms. When the Grey Pilgrim climbed to the Eagle's high halls, he came not as petitioner, but as fellow servant, reporting on his mission's progress and seeking confirmation that the time for greater intervention drew near. In Gwaihir's golden eyes, Gandalf would have seen reflected his own determination to see the task through to its end, whatever the cost. In the wizard's grey gaze, the Windlord would have recognized the patient wisdom that had guided Arda's children through countless trials toward their ultimate destiny. Their pact was sealed not with words alone, but with the mutual understanding that comes only to those who have surrendered their own will to a purpose greater than themselves. When the eagles rose to battle the Nazgul above the Morannon, when they scattered Sauron's fell beasts like leaves before a hurricane, they fought not merely for Middle-earth, but for the music itself, ensuring that the discord Morgoth had introduced into creation would not drown out the themes of joy and hope that gave the world its meaning. The hour of testing came at last, when the armies of the West stood before the Black Gate of Mordor, their small host dwarfed by the vast legions of the enemy, yet blazing with a courage that seemed to kindle stars in the surrounding darkness. Above them, the sky writhed with fell shapes as the Nazgul descended on their winged mounts, shrieking their hatred in voices that could freeze mortal blood and turn brave hearts to water. In that moment of supreme peril, when even the mightiest of Middle-earth's heroes felt the touch of despair, the wind itself seemed to change. From the north and west it came, carrying on its wings a sound that no throat of orc or troll had ever made. The wild, piercing cry of the great eagles, pure as mountain streams and terrible as the storm that levels forests. Gwaihir the Windlord led them, his vast form blocking Orwal. Ute portions of the sky as he dove toward the Nazgul with Landroval and Meneldor beside him, their talons spread like swords of living silver. The battle that followed raged in 3 dimensions, a war of sky as well as earth as eagle clashed with fell beast above the heads of armies that seemed suddenly small and distant. Each Nazgul found itself beset by creatures whose courage knew no shadow of fear, whose fierce joy in battle burned away the despair that was the ring-wraith's greatest weapon. Wing beat against wing, talon tore at corrupted hide, and the air itself rang with cries that spoke of kingdoms beyond the circles of the world. But the eagle's greatest service was yet to come. When the ring found its way at last to the fires of Mount Doom, when Sauron's power broke like a wave against the shore of his own destruction, two small figures lay unconscious on an island of stone, surrounded by rivers of molten rock. The mountain shook with the fury of its own collapse, and death seemed certain for the brave souls who had carried hope so far, only to perish within sight of victory. Then came Gwaihir, flying into the very heart of Orodruin's fury, with a courage that would have amazed even the Valar. Through smoke and flame, he navigated by instinct alone, his great heart guiding him to the small platform where Frodo and Sam lay helpless. With infinite care, the Lord of Eagles gathered them in his talons, not as prey, but as precious cargo, the most important burden he had ever carried. Behind him flew Landroval and Meneldor, their wings beating against the superheated air as they bore away from the mountain's death throes, the ring-bearer and his faithful companion. This was the culmination of the pact forged in secret councils among the peaks. Not a promise to fight every battle, but a vow that when the crucial moment came, when all other aid had failed and hope hung by the thinnest of threads, the Eagles would risk everything for the cause of light. In saving Frodo and Sam, they fulfilled not merely an obligation to Gandalf, but their deepest purpose as servants of the music that shaped all things. In the end, when all the accounts have been written and all the songs have been sung, when the last of the ring-bearers has sailed into the west and Middle-earth settles into the quieter rhythms of the Age of Men, what remains of the secret pact between Gandalf and the Great Eagles is not the specifics of words spoken or oaths sworn, but something far more precious and enduring, the living proof that in a world touched by darkness, eucatastrophe is always possible. Eucatastrophe, Tolkien's own word for the sudden joyous turn when all seems lost, the moment when despair transforms into hope as surely as night gives way to dawn. It is the providence that works through seeming chance, the grace that comes unlooked for to those who have given up looking, the rescue that arrives not because it was earned, but because it was needed. In the cry of eagles on the wind, in the shadow of great wings falling across battlefields where courage makes its last stand against overwhelming odds, we hear the echo of that music which sang the world into being and will sing it home at last. The secret meeting between wizard and eagles, whether it took place on some uncharted peak among the clouds or in the deeper realm where spirits recognize their kindred, represents something more fundamental than military alliance or mutual aid society. It speaks to the truth that no soul fights alone when it fights for what is right, that the very fabric of creation conspires to support those who choose light over darkness, hope over despair, love over hate. Perhaps there never was a formal council at all. Perhaps the pact existed from the moment Gandalf first set foot on Middle-earth's shores, written not in words, but in the harmony that binds all servants of the light. When Gwaihir bore the grey pilgrim from Orthanc, when the eagles came to the final battle, when they rescued the ring-bearer from the fires of Mount Doom, they acted not from obligation, but from recognition, seeing in these moments the will of Eru Ilúvatar himself, the one whose music encompasses all discord and resolves it into joy. As the wind dies down and the last eagle cry fades into the gathering dusk, we are left with this. In a world where shadows lengthen and hope grows dim, there are still those who watch from high places, ready to answer the call of need with the gift of their wings. The pact between Gandalf and the eagles reminds us that rescue comes not always in the form we expect, but always at the moment it is most needed, carried on wings we did not know were beating toward us through the darkness. In every age, in every hour of extremity, the same truth echoes across the circles of the world. We are not alone. Somewhere above the clouds, beyond the reach of our earthbound sight, The guardians are watching, and when all else fails, they will come. So, this story ends, but many await. Subscribe so no tale escapes you.